Um, our next presenter is Miss Minna Levinson. Miss Levinson is a national board certified teacher, and she works at Alderdice High School, which is a part of Pittsburgh Public Schools. There, Miss Levinson teaches Spanish and serves as the instructional teacher leader for the World Languages Department. She'll be discussing an interdisciplinary lesson on Spanish and history, looking at current events with a specific focus on the migration issues in Spain.
Thank you. Why does this matter? I'm a Spanish teacher. My students are there to learn Spanish. Why should they be interested in migration? Why should they be interested in Europe? Let's step back a minute. First of all, the Alderdice High School has approximately 1,450 students at the moment. We are an urban high school. We are a comprehensive high school, which means any student that comes to our door with proper verification of residence will be accepted. We have the entire range of students. We have students who perhaps are life skills or autistic, regular learners, students with learning disabilities, and we have approximately a third of the school tested as gifted. And students, even among the gifted students, we have students with a double special problem. We have students from all over the city of Pittsburgh. Some of the students come for the engineering magnet. We have about 9 neighborhoods that are the steady stream for most of the students. We have all socioeconomic levels. We have all academic levels. And we have an enormously diverse group of nationalities and backgrounds and languages. It is a true microcosm of society. The classes that I'm going to focus on would be a Spanish 5 AP. Most of the students are gifted, some of them are not. Some of them are just interested and willing to work it. So if I take you back to Europe and I take you back to the Iberian Peninsula, because it's a peninsula, it has been crisscrossed over thousands of years by the water, which was much easier to cross than coming through the Pyrenees. But the country has seen migration, wars, language differences all the way through its entire history. So if we bring that up to today, Spain is again experiencing the same thing. What happened before 2008? You had a housing boom, and consequently there were thousands and hundreds of thousands Latin Americans, for the most part, Dominican, some other Central American, and some from South America, who came to work in Spain, again for economic advantage. So there was a huge migration, huge. And there were some people that accepted them, and then there were some people who were quite distressed over their arrival. In 2008, with the housing bubble, the entire Spanish economy collapsed. It was living a lie. Excuse me to say that, but it was living a lie, and the economy crashed. Now, it did not get to the level of Greece, although it was pretty close, and so from having a very steady work available for its inhabitants and for the migrants, everything crashed. And now there were hundreds of thousands of migrants and locals who had no jobs. And again, this inherently builds all sorts of resentment and a myriad of feelings and a myriad of realities among the economy, among the economic factors of Spain. So why does this matter? We're looking at migrants again. Well, Spain has been recovering from its economic woes very diligently. as of last year, even almost 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds were unemployed. That's huge. The unemployment rate was in the high 20s overall. Again, that's huge. And so all of the feelings and all of the problems that are left over from that last migration have now started up again. And you had a number of people who were migrating from West Africa into Morocco, where Spain has two enclaves, which are actually part of the country, Melilla and Ceuta. And they were coming by boat across the Straits of Gibraltar, and they were climbing over fences from Morocco into Melilla and Ceuta, coming by boat. Once they were there, then they were in Spain, and they could start moving up. So Spain has had a history of migration, good and bad. Economics are a real problem, and they're trying to come out of this economic crisis. So what am I doing in a Spanish class? Well, the problem is that students at the level of an AP should be able to function and converse about ideas that are normal and of interest for their age range. And in an AP exam, any material might be there. So my thought is, and I've done this in a number of, thank you, I've done this in a number of, and I apologize, I did it in Spanish. So the idea here is to approximate these ideas that the students are studying and that we study in the class, and develop their Spanish abilities to be able to match up. And so they learn that Europe and Spain's interplay in Europe, and all of the interplay on the islands, on the peninsula, has a lot of meaning. And so the lesson is very simple. Number one is to take the students and to allow them to go research Spanish sources. It might be the Spanish television, which has plenty. It might be the myriad of newspapers in Spain. And each one will have its bent, because the newspapers are very subjective. Each newspaper is highly subjective, although they claim otherwise. So now the students, from a linguistic point of view, have this exposure as they are researching to vocabulary, to pictures, to culture, because language is nothing more than a representation of the culture. And the objective for them here is to find an article and use this guide. I attached one article as a possibility at the back here.
We're going to actually share that now, so
okay.
There
we go. All right. What you see in front of you is merely a skeletal framework for developing their language abilities, and then correlate. So using original sources to study the migration policy in Europe. At the top is, it asks for the title of the article. Students are free to choose the title they want. All right, this is good. The next is the actual address, if they use a website, so they can, this can be replicated. The next one is the theme, the main theme. Now I put it there, but I tend to suggest to them they wait to the very end. Then vocabulary that they can utilize as I stress verbs and other words and phrases that anybody will need to begin to talk about this topic in Spanish. So the students themselves are extracting vocabulary that will be needed. I have, for redacción is I want them to list out, I put 10 here, they could be less, the most important ideas. And then comes down to the last section, which is really the most part, are key questions to foment discussion. Because the person that chooses the article will then be the discussion leader. And I, as the teacher, sit back out of it, and that student all of this is being conducted now in Spanish, and that student is going to develop the questions and run the discussion. Hopefully, the objective will be that we really have a discussion and some argumentation and some different feelings and perspectives, and all of it is being done in Spanish. So now what you have is, it's met the objective, which our objective is speaking in Pittsburgh Public Schools, in the language department. We have had cross-cultural, we have had students who are doing independent research. They have developed their own ideas and their own perspectives. They have brought it orally, so they've done interpretive, which in foreign language they've done interpretive. They have done interpersonal, and if I want to continue on, then they could do some kind of written or oral presentation. So we've hit those three things, and we've merged. We've merged Spanish history, we've merged language, we've merged students' natural curiosity and abilities, and we've merged just their development in both language and history and culture. And that's where we are.
Well, thank you. So again, any questions for Ms. Levinson, please feel free to use the chat feature. I don't know if we have any from the room as well. But I'll just start off with one question. You did mention that you might use some newspapers. Do you have any specific names of newspapers that you've used in the past that other teachers maybe listening could maybe use as a resource?
Sure. I've used ABC, which tends to be center and center right. It is historically the newspaper of the monarchy, or taken over by Franco's dictatorship for 40 years. El País, which was the first newspaper at the end of the dictatorship and the restoration of the monarchy and the democracy, which started off as centrist, and now it has moved well to the left. El Diario, El Mundo, these are just in Spain. There's a wonderful site, and you can probably Google it, I think it's called Museum, and our newspapers online, there are a couple of them, and they have newspapers from all over the world in multiple languages. You pick your country, find the newspaper, and you could just read it online. So they could get the Moroccan perspective, they could get the Spanish perspective, they could get the Latin American perspective of all the Latin American migrants that are coming. The current migration hasn't hit Spain that hard because it's gone through its second wind when it had the West African people. But that hasn't been that large, and the Spanish economy is not set up at the moment to welcome workers. So again, not like Greece, but those newspapers, they could go to the Latin American newspapers, and the radio and television shows, the radio and television stations which actually publish material online. You could do the BBC in Spanish. You might do CNN in Spanish. I'm a little shaky on their Spanish.
Can you repeat again? El País started centrist and moved
Left.
Thank you.
I do have a question that's come through chat. It's a little long. Have you been able to integrate discussions of religion and migration / interculturality in Spanish-speaking realms? For example, Islam and Jewish cultures in Spain through the ages, Jewish exiles in Latin America after World War II, indigenous religions in the Americas, religious symbolisms, and cultural and Spanish-speaking flows of people. Is explicitly utilizing the topic of religious components of culture any different than other elements of language teaching?
Oh, okay. Let's see, one at a time. Great question. Thank you very much. First of all, if it exists, it is within the realm of possibility to be brought into the classroom within certain limits. I'd say you have to know your class. Yes, we've talked about Islam and 800 years of Moorish / Arab/Berber rule and the califatos is harkingly coming into modern society with ISIS and the new caliphs that are being named and the califatos that are being set up. So yeah, sometimes students, as far as having them bring in religious terms, sometimes students are very good about respectfully discussing. Sometimes we hit some buttons because we do have lots of different religions, and we do have a good portion of Jewish students, and we have Sudanese students, and so we have a mix. But yes, absolutely, you can do it. Know your students to know how you can maneuver through and where to put the limits, and if any intervention needs to happen to just set people straight. I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, please. Yeah.
Gracias.
Mucho gusto.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question about how appropriate would it be to address, say, political cartoons? When you were talking about papers and magazines, maybe I was thinking of Charlie Hebdo and what that type of editorializing might do for a conversation like this in a language class. Mm-hmm. Would that be something
Sure.
appropriate, or could you have students interpret or create their own?
I wouldn't go have them create their own, because my concern would be that they would put their 21st century North American thought processes into developing something that might end up somewhere somehow being inappropriate. As far as addressing Charlie Hebdo and all of those other issues, 100%. The French classes addressed it. Many of the language classes have signs in the hallways, in support of what was going on. Absolutely, we could discuss it. And the one caveat I put on there is I need to know my students, because one never knows which button will get pushed. But absolutely, if it is done in a respectful, objective to a certain degree, and subjective to another degree, and then if they can get into a discussion, state their view, and justify it in Spanish, I'm a happy camper. I'm a really happy camper. And we have done it.
Any other questions?
Real quick, if you want to take this and use it in a lower level class, my suggestion would be for the teacher to select one article and let the entire group work on one article. And rather than doing it individually, they might do it in pairs or in groups of 3, and then they could prepare it in that manner, and then discuss in pairs in small groups, put a couple of groups together, and then gradually work it up into a large discussion. So then just giving it more guidance and more direction than this, which is a little bit wide open.
Thank you. So unfortunately, our final speaker, Ms. Lauren Valles from North Hills School District, had a family emergency, so she was unable to join us this afternoon. But I did just want to share that she did actually a very interesting interdisciplinary lesson where she actually did a 90-minute time period where she took students from different classes and used a shared learning environment to kind of talk about different narratives and work with students. And she used a website called Choices. So I think it's www.choices.edu. And I'm actually at the end of this going to share with you a list of resources that I've compiled that I think would be useful to educators, and choices will be included. So I think it's something worthwhile in looking at in regards to preparing lessons on this topic. So I just open it up to any sort of final questions that anyone might have. If not, I think that may be it. So these could be questions for any of our presenters, but okay. Well, if anyone's typing, we'll get to that. But I just wanted to share just some reminders. Is that I will again email out a list of resources, and I'm also going to include just a brief survey. And that survey will just have some questions about how today went, timing, and things of that nature. So I'd appreciate it if you participated today, if you just took a few minutes to complete that survey as well. I'd also like to thank our presenters, so Dr. Haggerty, Mark DeSilvio, and Minna Levinson. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us and share your expertise on this topic. And thank you all very much for joining us remotely, and I hope that you have a great day.